Pokemon games are fun for a lot of people. The games have stayed largely the same over the years, with the exception of graphical improvements, quality of life updates, and some new gimmicks. After the very popular Pokemon Sun and Moon, followed by the disappointingly familiar Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, as well as the incredibly successful and popular Nintendo Switch, a lot of people were looking forward to what was next for Pokemon on the Switch. First, we got Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. At first, people were confused as to whether this was a spin-off or if it was supposed to be a mainline game. The general consensus of the fans seemed mixed. Then we got Pokemon Sword and Shield versions. These were advertised as the new generation Pokemon games. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee were just something to hold us over until the big games were ready. But, I don't know. Okay, people were tearing this game apart before it even launched. There were some legitimate critiques, but which Pokemon game for Switch is better? Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee or Sword and Shield? And is this a fair comparison? Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are the first mainline Pokemon games to not include the entire Pokédex. Mainline in the sense that it's a full Pokemon game where you can collect 8 gym badges, trade, battle with friends, beat the Elite Four, all the stuff you would normally do in a normal Pokemon game. Pokemon Let's Go is a remake of Red and Green versions, or Yellow version. And most of the fans, and even really the developers, didn't really consider this a mainline Pokemon game. So only having the original 151 Pokemon, plus 2 new ones, wasn't really a big deal. It was nostalgic, and we knew it was meant to draw in the Pokemon Go crowd to the Nintendo Switch, and we were assured that this isn't the real Pokemon game. The next-gen games were coming. So I played the game with that in mind, and I really enjoyed it. The playthrough of the game is very similar to Yellow version. You explore Kanto in pretty much the same order as the past games, but you start with Pikachu, or Eevee, instead of the typical starter Pokemon. If you've ever played Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, Yellow, or even Fire Red or Leaf Green, you know exactly what to expect from this game, which in all honesty is completely fine. There's nothing wrong with a remaster or reimagining of a classic game. Most of the wild Pokemon are in the same areas. You can even find Pokemon in the wild that were never previously in the wild before, like Charizard, Dragonite, the 3 starter Pokemon, and even the 3 legendary birds on very rare occasions. Basically, you can complete most of the Pokédex pretty easily just by catching Pokemon, aside from the version exclusives that require trading and the 3 mythical Pokemon in the game. Yeah, so there's actually 3 mythical Pokemon you can register in the Pokédex. It's Mew, Meltan, and Melmetal. Mew is actually one of the biggest complaints about these games. The only way you can get Mew is to buy a brand new Pokeball Plus, putting a complete Pokédex behind a paywall. Meltan and Melmetal are free and easy to get, assuming you already have a smartphone for other things. You can get them from Pokemon Go and transfer them over. Basically, you could complete the Pokédex in a very reasonable amount of time. Let's Go Pikachu is actually the first game that I've ever completed the Pokédex in, and it was really fun. Now, is it the same as completing the National Dex in a game like Sun and Moon? No, of course not. But for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of time to play games, this might be the perfect Pokemon game for you. Now, to play devil's advocate, if you've already spent a ton of time on Pokemon Go, it is very tempting and easy to transfer the entire Gen 1 Pokédex to your game. And if you did that, I can see how it would not be very fun. However, on the flip side, there's a Master Trainer post-game quest. Sure, you can catch them all, but can you train them all? The Master Trainers will battle you with one of each Pokemon from the Pokédex, and you have to battle them with that same Pokemon. Caterpie vs Caterpie, Pidgey vs Pidgey, Dragonite vs Dragonite, etc. It's quite a challenge that can keep you busy for a while, even after completing the Pokédex, and it makes you play the game different. The biggest change to this game was the wild Pokemon encounters. When you're running around on routes or in grass, wild Pokemon don't randomly appear anymore. Instead, you actually see them walking, swimming, or flying around. This makes it much easier to avoid wild battles if you want to, and it makes the area look more alive. Additionally, if a wild Pokemon is going to be shiny, you will actually see it in the overworld, which makes shiny hunting a lot easier. Catching Pokemon is very similar to Pokemon Go. You move the Joy-Con like you're throwing a Pokeball, and you try to time it just right. I'll take this as an opportunity to talk about the controls. Pokemon games usually have pretty simple controls, but the controller options were another thing that people were pretty upset about. You have 4 options. Left Joy-Con, you hold it vertically in your left hand, the stick makes you move, and there are enough buttons to do everything you need to do in a Pokemon game. But it's a strange way to play a game. It makes a little more sense once you account for the Pokeball throwing mechanic, and honestly, once I got used to it, it ended up being a pretty simple and relaxing way to play the game. The HD rumble when you are catching Pokemon is pretty awesome as well. The right Joy-Con is pretty much the same as the left Joy-Con, except you might prefer it if you're right-handed. When the game is in handheld mode, you will use both Joy-Cons to control the game. It feels a lot like playing a DS or 3DS Pokemon game. Catching Pokemon requires you to tilt the system around instead of flicking the Joy-Con, which I didn't really like personally, but it's up to you. The Pokeball Plus is one of my favorite controllers of all time. Unfortunately, the controls aren't immediately obvious. The center part of the Pokeball is the joystick you use to move around, but you can also press it down to act as the A button. There's also a button on top that can be used to go back or open up your menu, and in instances where you would need to press the Y button, you shake the controller. Catching wild Pokemon is really where this controller is at its best. The HD rumble on the Pokeball Plus feels really good. Everything the Pokeball does, whether it's wobbling around or a Pokemon is breaking out of it or you just caught a Pokemon, you can feel it with the rumble. That, along with the LED lights and the awesome sound effects, really gives you a unique and immersive Pokemon catching experience, which sounds kind of weird to say about a Pokemon game, but it's true. I enjoy wild Pokemon encounters a lot more with this controller. Also, one little detail that can't be overlooked. When you plug it into charge, it makes this sound. That is awesome. Now, is it perfect? No. Because the controller is a sphere, it's really easy for it to move around in your hand and get disoriented, and then you're moving the control stick the wrong way and it's really annoying. But on the bright side, my Pokeball Plus has never had drift like the Joy-Cons, although that could be because I use it way less. So I really like the Pokeball Plus controller and recommend anybody playing uses this to play, but I understand people's complaints. Why can't you use the Pro Controller or connected Joy-Cons? That would seem like the simplest way to play, and that is essentially the same control scheme that the handheld mode already has, but for whatever reason, it's not an option in docked mode. It's not a big deal to me, but I understand why it is for other people. Just like the other mainline Pokemon games, this one had some Pokemon distribution events, although none from GameStop this time. There were a couple of events for Mewtwo, Shiny Pikachu, Shiny Eevee, and even a Shiny Krabby. I missed out on most of these events for some reason, although they aren't region locked, so I was able to get a code for the Pokemon Center Chansey. Overall, I think Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are great games. Great for Pokemon fans who don't have a lot of spare time for gaming, but it also has a decent amount of semi-interesting post-game stuff to do. The Pokédex being cut down to 153 Pokemon makes the amount of Pokemon in the game pretty small, but being a Kanto remake, it kind of works in this instance. The world feels more alive than ever with Pokemon running around all over the place. The Pokemon following you feature is something that everyone loves, and the Pokemon you can ride is fun, diverse, and creative. So how do Sword and Shield compare? This is it, the next-gen mainline Pokemon games for Nintendo Switch. When they first showed gameplay of the game, people were excited. People were calling it the Breath of the Wild of Pokemon, but some people started noticing that some of the graphics didn't look so great. This tree became a meme for a while, with people comparing it to N64 or PS2 graphics. But all hell broke loose when they announced that there would be no national dex, and you couldn't obtain every single Pokemon from previous generations in Pokemon Sword and Shield. The developers explained that with so many Pokemon already existing and with new ones constantly being added, they knew at some point they would have to stop including the national dex in the Pokemon mainline games. They said that recreating so many Pokemon models would take too much time. However, fans started comparing the models shown in the trailer to Pokemon models from previous games, and started calling them out for it. Apparently during the X and Y games, they future-proofed themselves by making super high-resolution models for each Pokemon that they could reuse in each game. So some fans speculated that Game Freak was simply being lazy and didn't want to include all the Pokemon, even though they had all the assets at their disposal. Honestly, I don't know. I was quite shocked when they announced there was no national dex in Sword and Shield. I did expect that there would be, but I was kind of okay with it. I figured I had a lot of fun with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and it didn't have a national dex, so maybe I'll like this game, and maybe I'll complete the Pokédex on this game as well. But anyway, the game starts off pretty standard. The first few areas look pretty impressive for a Pokemon game, but not too impressive for a Switch game. There's a lot of hand-holding at the beginning, but once you finally get through most of it, you finally get to the wild area. The wild area was the most hyped part of the game. It's full 3D and you can move your camera angle around. Pokemon pop up in the grass just like Let's Go, making it look, I guess, somewhat alive, and there's not a lot to do here. Don't get me wrong. As you're progressing through the incredibly mediocre story, the wild area is kind of fun and really useful to level up your Pokemon. But for the most hyped up part of the game, there really isn't a lot to do here. It honestly looks like a fan-made concept of what an open world version of Pokemon would be like, but not nearly complete. And pretty much the entire wild area is unlocked at the beginning of the game, so there's nothing to really even work towards. The main things that you can do in the wild area are battle, catch wild Pokemon, and participate in raid battles. The wild Pokemon battles have largely returned to more traditional battles from previous games, except that wild Pokemon still roam around in the grass instead of randomly appearing. Oh, and for whatever reason, you won't see shiny Pokemon in the overworld anymore, even though they had this feature in the previous Let's Go games. Raid battles are pretty fun, but some of them are pretty hard and require you to play with people online to beat it because the AI trainers are awful. Oh, the online. The online is simultaneously the best and the worst thing about the wild area. When you go online, suddenly you'll see other trainers walking, riding their bikes around the wild area, just like you are. First of all, it makes the game lag like crazy. And second, you can't interact with these people, except to get some useless items that you're probably never going to use. So honestly, it's a really good attempt at making the Pokemon world feel alive, but it lags, it looks awful, and it doesn't do anything, so they shouldn't have included it. You have to be online to invite people to your raid battles, but you can also join other people's raid battles through the stamp system that only works like 30% of the time. Sometimes a raid battle will be full or they'll start early, but the stamp won't disappear, so you either have to disconnect and then reconnect to load new stamps, and hope that that works, or just wait for an arbitrary amount of time for the game to give you the option to reload the stamps and hope that works. Hosting your own raid is usually the easiest way to get things going, but even then it's hard to get people to join. I assume because they're experiencing the same problems trying to join. There's so much potential here, but it was just so poorly done that it's almost not worth bothering with. But as for the rest of the game, it's alright. It's pretty much a standard Pokemon game, nothing special. A few cities look pretty nice, but there isn't a lot to do in them. There's a ton of doors you can't even go in, so there's nothing really extra to explore. I guess it is worth mentioning that the Pokeball Plus controller that I praised so much when talking about Let's Go is functional with these games. But you can't use it as a controller, and you can't use it to catch Pokemon like you did in Let's Go. You can use it to take your Pokemon for a stroll, and I guess that's fun. The game got good reviews and it did well, but there was a handful of fans, myself included, that were not too happy with this game. But then they announced the DLC, which was something sort of new for the Pokemon franchise. The Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra are two DLCs that you can buy for $30 on top of the $60 that you spent on the main game. So what do you get for $90? Well, at the time of writing this, the Isle of Armor is out and the Crown Tundra is not yet released. But with the Isle of Armor, it's just more wild area that suffers from the exact same problems as the original area. I'm not even joking. You do have a story to complete, which is a little bit more engaging than the main story, just because it's something different. You complete some challenges, some battles, you get a legendary Pokemon called Kubfu, and then after some more battles, you can evolve it. You do need to have Kubfu at a fairly high level to complete the challenges that you need to do to evolve it, so that will keep you busy for a while, and the final battle is kind of cool. On top of that, you have a side mission to find a ton of Alolan Diglets hiding around the island, but it feels like something that should have been part of the main game. In fact, that's the problem with this entire DLC, in my opinion. It's so short and so insignificant, and the main game is so lacking of content, that this should have just been post-game content included in the game. They also added some previous gen Pokemon that, again, probably should have been included in the base game at launch, not months after the game released. And they added some new wardrobe options and new styles for your bike, which is great, but $15 for this? But we bought it, and that is what I think is the problem with most Pokemon games at this point. Most Pokemon games will sell incredibly well regardless, and that I think is one of the main reasons that these games do not evolve the franchise like Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild did. To be fair, after beating both games, I play Pokemon Shield version a lot more than I do the Let's Go games. And that's probably because there is still more to do and the game is frequently updated. It's true that Sword and Shield are bigger games, and the events and wild area updates make it more fun to play at times. However, I would argue that Sword and Shield and the Let's Go games are at least on equal playing field for comparison, and here's why. Both games are a standard adventure from a typical Pokemon game. Both games have an incomplete Pokédex, and you can even transfer Pokemon back and forth between these games through the Pokemon Home app. Sword and Shield don't feel like a next-gen game to me and feels way more similar to the Let's Go games in my opinion. And that's why I think it's fair to compare these games, but perhaps you disagree and that's okay. So how does Sword and Shield stack up against Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee? I'm well aware that this may be the unpopular opinion, but if you've watched this long, I think you know what I'm going to say. But I think Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are better games than Sword and Shield. Game Freak knew exactly what they wanted these games to be, and they did it. While Sword and Shield feels like they just pumped out another generic Pokemon game. Let's Go was gimmicky, but I found it refreshing and fun, and even though it was clearly pandering to older fans and Pokemon Go players, they didn't try to hide it, and ultimately, I enjoyed it a lot. Pokemon Sword and Shield were more of the same, which is exactly what I did not want after coming off of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. The DLC so far doesn't seem like it was even worth the $30, and ultimately I expected a whole lot more from the first new-gen Pokemon game on Nintendo Switch. I think Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are the better games, but that's just my opinion, and if you disagree with me, please let me know in the comments down below. I read everything, and I might even respond. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys next time.